So Amazon announced today that they are temporarily prioritizing products coming into their fulfillment centers until April 5th. They're only accepting shipments of what they consider to be essential items right now. And we're seeing a mixed response from sellers. Some sellers think this is a good response to what's happening. Some sellers naturally are concerned about the future of their business and the future of Amazon. So with us today, we have as many experts as we could get together in a short period of time. We have Chris McCabe from ecommerceChris, Kelsey Robb from Ticketmetrics, Jason Boyce from Avenue 7 Media, James Thompson from Buy Box Experts, and Victoria Sullivan from Payability. So first question, and I'm going to give this one to Chris to get us started. What do you think the impact of this is going to be?
Right. So the immediate impact we've seen is panic, but then everyone's trying to figure out how to strategize and what to do next. Obviously, it's not fantastic if you have to try to figure out if you have a household staple or not. Fortunately, there was recently posted a list, right, of what's considered a staple, but also medical supplies are considered essential items, right? I wanted to start with you, Jason, because you manage an agency and you've probably been talking to people all day long about what the heck to do first. So what would you say the immediate impact is for your clients?
First, panic. Second, take a deep breath and take 4 or 5 more deep breaths. It's funny. There's we've got a mix of categories that we work with in our agency, and depending on the category, some folks are doing quite well, and this is not going to affect them, right? Mm-hmm. So the cold and remedy clients that we have are not going to be affected by this. The the suppliers of things like masks and others are not going to be affected by this. And it's a real challenge. And here's the other side of the story for the third-party seller who's not able to restock their inventory. Number one, they're already lean and they're thin because cash flow, which Amazon has been squeezing for a couple of years now or longer, is getting tighter and tighter. So they're sending weekly inventory, bi-weekly inventory, monthly inventory at the most. And so they're going to be out of stock. And everybody who knows anything about Amazon listings, what happens to your listing when you run out of stock? Your rank tanks. Yeah. So what do you do? What do you do about that? And then then the next thing you're going to do is you're going to raise your price, right? Standard tactic. You start to incrementally raise your price. And then an Amazon shopper says, you're price gouging. We're going to deactivate you. This is like this really nightmare cycle that third-party sellers are in. And quite frankly, I'm surprised that, I'm surprised. Usually Amazon's way ahead of this stuff. They're much farther ahead of these things. They announced they're hiring 100,000. Maybe the planning on this started a month ago. But I'm really concerned about the third-party sellers, especially the ones that can't fulfill inventory, that are going to be out of stock, that are going to lose rank, and that are going to lose revenue. My question to Amazon is, what can you do to help the third-party sellers whom you depend on for the success of your business? Unfortunately, their answer is probably going to be nothing. But that was kind of a long diatribe there, Chris. I'm not sure if that answered your question.
No, I mean, I don't know if nothing will be an acceptable answer. I mean, this is too big of a crisis. It impacts too many kinds of sellers that they have to come up. Just like the U.S. government has to come up with something, and other governments, they have to come up with some way of helping not just buyers, but sellers, everybody who's a stakeholder in the system. And the price gouging, we're hearing from people constantly from the suspensions. They're suspended, whether they were automating their pricing or doing it manually, they didn't have a process in place to prevent price gouging from even, coming up as a potential threat. So I guess my next question, James, are you hearing or having the same conversations that Jason is with his clients, or is the focus a little bit different?
I look a little gruff because it's been a crazy day.
That's right.
I think it's important. There's a couple of things that have happened in the past where I think we can learn from what Amazon is doing and how they're likely going to handle this. When I was at Amazon, 3 times Amazon ran out of warehouse space in Q4. And 3 times they had to go to FBA sellers and say, you can come in, you can't come in, or you can come in for 25 units, you can come in for 25,000 units. And so everybody freaked out and said, well, I don't really have an alternative for fulfillment. What am I supposed to do? And every single day, Amazon worked through, I was part of this horrendous task twice, where we basically said, okay, 1,000 units of space just opened up. Who are we going to prioritize? Well, this is the same kind of triage that hospitals are dealing with right now. And so in many ways, I am sympathetic to sellers because many of them do not have they don't have contingency plans for doing fulfillment. But in the big picture, this is a small problem compared to the problems that other parts of society are dealing with right now around, oh my gosh, we don't have a ventilator. Oh, one just became available. Who gets it and who doesn't get it? So unfortunately, everything around coronavirus that's affected sellers, whether it's problems replenishing inventory, whether it's problems now having to actually fulfill orders, all of this is, in many ways, boils down to sellers have doubled down every day on Amazon. There hasn't been time to think about, oh, let's build a contingency plan. Let's have a month's worth of cash flow. Oh, let's have emergency inventory sitting somewhere. Those are conversations that rarely happen because, gosh, I'm going to be a seller on Amazon. I'm going to make $1 million. I'm just going to keep doubling down. Yeah. Unfortunately, when some variation too big pops up, and in this case, there's multiple levels of variation that have popped up, there's lots of people standing there with no pants on saying, oh my gosh, I don't have another pair of pants. What am I supposed to do? So the good news is Amazon wants to work through this problem as fast as they can too. And this really comes down to, there's probably, what's driving this is there's massive last mile capacity constraints right now. Even if Amazon's warehouses have space for product, they can't fill the orders and get them delivered within a 1 to 2 to 3 day period, because Amazon didn't have enough time to work with USPS and UPS and USPS and all the other local carriers in different cities to say, hey, we anticipate, Q4 sales in the next 4 to 6 weeks. How can we ramp up trucks and so on? If Amazon has to come up with, 200 more transport trucks to move stuff overnight, okay, well, it takes time to do that. And if you need to get a bunch of extra cargo planes, it takes time to do that. Granted, there are a lot of empty passenger planes you could use, but the reality is it takes time to get organized here. And Amazon doesn't have 100% control over last mile delivery. They need to work with their third-party partners and figure out how to scale this. That's why Amazon said, hey, listen, we need 3 weeks. Not we need an indefinite period of time, but we need 3 weeks. And realistically, it's going to end up probably being shorter than that.
Right. No, it's a logistical nightmare. Vicky, what kind of cash flow? You must be having these conversations all day long. What are people doing to prioritize their cash flow concerns, and what kind of strategic decisions are they making that are different from the normal, usual ones where, of course, they're trying to get their hands on as much cash as quickly as possible? How does this impact it from your perspective?
Well, we've really seen it both ways, right? Where, if you are selling Purell or any of these medical supplies, you probably aren't having trouble finding a place to sell them. You're probably having trouble fulfilling demand. So getting your payments sooner from Amazon, which we provide, is definitely something we've seen a lot of sellers doing, or reaching into emergency stock. I would say it really works both ways. Marketplaces have always been great at generating demand, and right now demand is even higher. So anything you can do to fill demand, to make sure that, not only are you making every sale you can possibly make, but people are getting the things that they need, you should be able to doing, whether it's, finding fulfillment alternatives or cash flow alternatives, getting paid sooner for your sales, getting in advance on future sales. Those are just a few things that we've seen people doing.
Do you find that people have an emergency plan already set to go? I mean, like for account suspensions, Leah and I are always telling people, be prepared for a suspension in case it hits. Is there a way of doing that for like a crisis like this in terms of cash flow?
Getting paid sooner for your sales is definitely a great way of doing that, because that way you have your sales up front. You have more control over your cash flow, and you're not, waiting for Amazon to pay you in order to act in many ways, especially if, you don't have reserves, or, your credit's maxed out, or anything like that. But like what was said before, people do have to have more of a backup plan, for things like this, and diversify their businesses as well. With different SKUs, different marketplaces, different channels. And I think that, that's a lot of what is going to come out of this.
I had a quick question for Kelsey, because I saw a lot of people's initial response to free up cash flow was to turn off their PPC, which I actually don't think is the best idea. So as far as PPC goes, what should sellers be doing?
Yeah, so we've taken a different approach to the panic, where we've approached it in a way that's, let's ask the questions that are going to get the answers that we need in order to provide our clients with the best next step. So we've tried to take some of the panic out of it. I was joking today, our team of analysts is now also a team of psychiatrists, and we're dealing with the emotional side of selling on Amazon. So we're really wearing a lot of hats. But I definitely agree with you. I think the first conclusion to jump to is like, stop spend wherever it is. And that's really not what the market is showing right now. If anything, we're seeing an opposite trend where people are actually just spending more time online and people are still shopping. There are different industries that are seeing an impact that you might not think of, like kids' toys, because there are children staying home from school. So you might not think that a coloring book is something that's flying off the quote unquote shelves of Amazon, but they're actually seeing really strong performance. Conversely, there are things that are focused around events, weddings and things of that nature that are seeing a bit of a dip. So those are the conversations we're having on a case-by-case basis with each of our clients, because it really is so independent on how much inventory they have, if they have a different means of fulfillment, if they have additional ways of getting inventory to either Amazon or to their customers. There's so many different things that go into that. So I think the biggest thing we're focusing on is looking at the facts and not letting that panic set in. People come to us as that Amazon expert, and that's really what they're paying us for. So we're trying to approach it from a very logical and quantitative standpoint.
Did they ever talk about if they losing sales rank, if they stop their ad spend, or they cut it dramatically? Do they fold into that conversation what it's going to do to their sales rank longer term?
So there's a couple of things that go into that. Obviously, if you aren't selling products, your sales rank is going to be affected whether you're advertising or not. So if the demand isn't there for the types of products that you're selling, that's a conversation that you have to have internally and kind of figure that out. I think right now the focus should be more on being profitable and making the most out of the margin that you have. Yes, sales rank is a huge thing that all of our sellers focus on. But at the end of the day, there are other things that you can do to impact your performance on Amazon from an advertising perspective. So trying not to focus on all of the little small things and looking at it from a bigger picture and looking at it from a longer term picture is really what's going to be best for our partners.
So Leah, you've been working with people, round the clock on listing compliance and violations of every stripe, right? Like ASIN variation abuse, PDP tampering? How does that fit in? How does that fit into the greater?
A lot of ASIN variation misuse, right. And I think I'm expecting to see more of that, and even Amazon is expecting to see more of that. They addressed it specifically in the email that went out. So my advice is, please don't put your listing with incorrect information to try to get around shipping restrictions, because 1, you'll get suspended, and 2, those teams are so backed up right now that getting a response is going to take a lot longer than it would normally.
It was already taking a long time. So this is a backlog added to the backlog, which I guess brings me to the next question, which isn't the immediate impact of today's announcement into the weeks or months of the coronavirus and what it's going to mean to Amazon businesses. Jason, what do you think, in terms of long-term plans for this kind of thing? What's the best advice for your clients or for sellers in general?
There's so many unknowables right now, Chris. The closest thing that I experienced, like what we're about to experience, or what we're in the beginning of or in the midst of, is the 2008 financial crisis. Mm-hmm. And it took sort of a long time. Like I was in the home rec space. I was a large Amazon seller, 8-figure a year seller, and we were kind of the canary in the coal mine, because when the economy is doing poorly, you're not out buying a pool table, right? And then when the market crashed, that business just evaporated. So, I sat down with my partners, my brothers at the time. We pulled out the financials and we started looking at the line items that we needed to cut. Ironically, at that point, our business suffered so badly that we actually shut down our office. We shut down our warehouse, moved more items into, into third-party logistics warehouses. We cut costs wherever we could, and we transitioned to a work from home model, which everyone is involuntarily doing right now. And so I think that if you are in a category like travel or travel accessories, and you're selling luggage on Amazon, my hunch is your business is suffering greatly, and it will continue to do so into the near future. So this is the time to take drastic, decisive actions to cut your costs where you can. And then on the flip side of that, I mean, I think there's a lot of capital that's going to be freed up. Ami Kassar is an old friend of mine, and James, he's spoken at the Prosper Show a number of times. He's really leading with multi-funding his agency, and talking about some of the SBA lending and funds that are available. You can get up to $350,000 if you can show the past year's tax returns and financials that you were profitable. You can get up to that amount without having to sign away your firstborn child. And I think that if you're in one of those industries, it's going to be in a hurt locker for the next 6 months, then seek as much capital as you can and cut costs. So it's both. And then
loans. I mean, that's a governmental solution. Maybe that's an Amazon solution to expand the parameters around lending. James, you've probably been on the phone all day with people talking doomsday scenarios and the sky's falling. Do you just think Amazon's smart and they're strong and they've got resources, they'll sort it out? Or what's your take on the longer term, weeks to months picture here?
So I heard yesterday that Amazon has been in touch with the White House multiple times a day for the last couple of weeks. And so while the White House figures out what national policy we're going to have, let's be clear, what does Amazon have that basically nobody else has? And that is extremely broad ability to distribute different products. And so as long as Amazon can keep those products in stock, which is easy to do when you push everybody else out of the warehouse, Amazon, sort of like Coca-Cola being able to get its product into the far jungles of the world, Amazon has the ability to get product to pretty much anybody in this country. And so if they can make sure that they prioritize certain types of products from an inventory perspective, but they also are still able to deliver on the Prime promise within that 1-2 day delivery, given that their last mile logistics partners didn't get much warning either that there's this huge increase in demand. And I think what Amazon's doing is actually very prudent from a social perspective. Now, let's be very clear. Amazon's still making money on every transaction, but they can do the things that are needed for society until Amazon figures out how to ramp up and employ more last mile delivery people, or be able to free up space in a warehouse of stuff that isn't going to sell quickly and put stuff in there that is going to be more effective. Between not having enough last mile capacity and running out of stock of certain products that everybody needs and can't otherwise find, this is challenging for Amazon, because Amazon's also losing out on stuff they would normally sell and not have an inventory limitation on. So I'm sorry, I'm babbling here a little bit, but I think at the end of the day,
it's a chaotic time.
There are particular sellers that are going to feel a lot of hurt because they can't pay their bills, or they've run out of stock and can't replenish. But what I'm hearing out of China is we're now well over 80% of the manufacturing capacity is back up and running. Add on 2 weeks for shipping, add on another weeks for clearing through customs and such. In the next 2 to 3 weeks, which is about the same timeline that Amazon has put on these FBA limitations, for some sellers, they don't even have inventory to send into FBA. And even if they did, they don't have cash to pay for it. And so I don't want to sound insensitive, but I think the problem's not as bad as we all want to think it is. There are going to be individual sellers that, no question, major hurt. The collective impact of what Amazon's done, I think, is a smart move to do. It's just going to remind us all that we need to have contingency plans. And if I look at the last decade of my working with Amazon sellers, most Amazon sellers do not have a doomsday strategy in place. And in fact, they don't even have a strategy in place that says, my account got suspended for 2 weeks and my disbursement's been suspended for 4 weeks. And you deal with that every day, Chris. And the reality is there's so much we can't individually control. And here's a situation where crazy amounts of things we can't control have all happened at once.
I think one net positive out of this, however long it takes, is that people will prepare for bad, ugly days in the future ahead of time more often, whether it's an account suspension or they can't get inventory out of China. The cruel twist here, of course, is that the factories are kind of coming back online and they're finally going to be able to get their products in from China, and then they can't send them to FBA because they won't be able to accept the shipments. I mean, that's the crazy thing.
But
after all these
they're not
weeks.
restricting FBM, so there's nothing to stop you getting your
Right.
shipment from China sent to your other warehouse somewhere, or even, to your home if you have space.
For all those people that have kids that are stuck at home now, that's
cheap labor.
That's called labor. That's called darn cheap labor. Just feed them noodles and cookies.
Yes. Observe all local and state labor laws, everybody. Just throw that out there. Yeah. So yeah, Vicky, I kind of touched on this a second ago, but just in terms of long-term cash flow planning, maybe people didn't have an emergency plan in place now. Do they talk to you about like, hey, we're putting our account on vacation mode, or we have to just run some numbers and figure out what we can do from here? How does payability look at the options that people are facing for not just a week or two, but like weeks or months of this?
We've definitely seen it both ways. We've seen people who are definitely hurting, putting their account on vacation mode, or can't get their inventory into FBA. But like was said before, things like school supplies, children's coloring books, and yoga mats. People who now want to work out at home. All that type. It really depends on what you have and if you can fulfill it.
Right.
So depending on a lot of people are home, they are shopping. They do seem to have a lot of increase in time. They now have their kids home and want to occupy them. So there are a lot of businesses that just need to buy a lot more inventory and maybe find a different way of fulfilling it. Probably if you haven't sent your inventory to FBA yet, it's probably best to just send it to your house or
your garage
center for the next few weeks. If it's already at FBA, then you might be running into two more issues. It really depends on what you're selling and your ability to fulfill it and your ability to source. So we've seen it with people who are selling more than they've ever sold, and people who are really being affected by those.
Depending on when this video
like Kelsey
airs,
was saying. Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, depending on when this video airs, what I would suggest is that people listening should be buying, padded envelopes and tape as fast as they can, because Amazon's going to run out of that.
Good point.
Figure out how to do fulfillment themselves.
Leah's going to be posting this video in the very near future. So it's
today.
We're coming up on 5 o'clock Eastern. It'll be shortly after that. But
right.
So like
So
Kelsey was.
We're out of stock of padded envelopes and tape, we know to blame James.
Right. Ask James because he's selling it from his garage. Amazon started in a garage after all, so we're going
his three boys are out there right now.
Right. Amazon began in a garage in Bellevue. We're going right back into the garage, just not in Bellevue, Washington. So Kelsey, aside from the fact that we're both grieving that Tom Brady's leaving the Patriots from Boston, which I don't know if you're a Boston native or not, but you're in the Boston area like me. Aside from that, Tychometrics, I imagine you discuss long-term ad strategies with people all the time, every day. How is this different than the normal, aside from the obvious, how is this different from the usual 3, 4, 5 month plan discussions that you have with clients?
Yeah, so definitely mourning the loss. I'm pretending he's just putting himself in quarantine and he'll be back after a couple of weeks. That's what I'm going with. It's interesting because I started these conversations with my clients back when we were first anticipating supply chain impact from the Chinese factories being closed. So while today's news is new and changes a few things, we've already talked about kind of the longer term implications of what inventory shortages may look like where those inventory shortages may come from, talking about what products make sense to continue advertising or maybe turn off for the immediate future. So a lot of these conversations have already been started with our partners, which is really great. It puts us in a good position so that, again, we're kind of avoiding that immediate panic and giving them the guidance and the trust and the mental support that they need to continue moving on. So it's that all plays a big role in it. I think Prime Day is kind of that like ugly elephant in the corner that people are still really nervous about. But I was talking, I mentioned earlier, a client that works specifically with like prom and wedding related items. You know, yes, their business right now isn't seeing a lot of growth. In fact, it's seeing the opposite. But once we're out of this situation, I would expect to see a huge influx of orders. So it's really interesting in the way that all of these different products are going to be impacted. You know, even within one seller, you could have something that's seeing an increase in sales and seeing a decrease in sales based off of what they're selling. So it's really like we try to be an extension of the teams that we work with and understand their business and their product suite. So it gives us an upper hand to be able to have those conversations. But yeah, we started these a couple weeks ago. So we're taking every day, every news day in stride and figuring out how we can best move forward. But again, asking the questions that will give us those insights to be able to better prepare them for the future.
Right. I mean, there's a lull, and it's not just a lull, that's a bad word for it, but then there'll be a spike, right? And that's, it depends on what category, what product you have, but that's, you know, something we can hope for. It's not just all darkness. Eventually people will get back and be buying these products maybe twice as much as they were before because they appreciate what it's like to go without them. So
well,
I thought I'd give
empathy is key.
Yeah, I thought I'd give Leah the last word here because Leah, you've had a glimpse into all these different worlds. You're a logistics expert, order fulfillment background. You've managed a startup's Amazon account. You've seen the account suspension world. You do listing compliance. With your logistics background and everything else that you've seen in the Amazon space, what do you think is coming at us next from either Amazon or from sellers?
I think we're going to see a lot more fulfillment by merchants for as long as that's possible. I mean, even with these restrictions placed on FBA, chances are that there's going to be some delays in getting your inventory into FBA and getting it back out to customers. So preparing to fulfill your own inventory and being able to adapt as these things are changing is really the best thing that you can do right now.
So Leah and Chris, you guys are going to get a spike in business yourself because fulfillment by merchant is hard. And when the deliveries are late or the shipments go out because your garage is overflowing and you can't get them out on time, guess where that throws your account? So
what if you don't have
I would like to hope that they're going to give you a little bit of leeway as far as shipping times at the moment.
That's my hope, right? That's my
hope.
I hope that Amazon will come out and give the third-party seller a break.
I think that for security purposes, perhaps purchasing your shipping from Amazon directly is a slightly safer option than purchasing it through some other third party, just because
it always is.
If it's late, then that's their fault.
Yeah,
right.
But I mean, yeah, I think we're going to see a lot. We're going to see, of course, we're going to have to see movement away from FBA.
Right. I mean, not everyone has warehouse space ready to go. Some people are 100% FBA and they didn't expect a day like this to come. So are they just on the phone with warehouses calling everyone around the clock saying now we're all FBM or what?
Well, something we haven't touched on at all really is that this is affecting vendors as well. A lot of vendors didn't get their purchase orders this week.
Right.
Some of them have...
Yeah.
Sorry, Leah, I was on 3 of those calls today with my client and their third-party logistics company, which was their long-term storage fulfillment house. Now is going to be their pick and pack house for the short term because they're concerned about stocking an FBA. So
that says it all.
Yeah.
Well, thanks everyone for taking the time on such a hectic day to get together. Obviously, we're here to help sellers in all various ways of expertise that these people offer. Kelsey from Tychometrics, James Thompson from Buybox Experts, Jason Boyce, Leah, and Vicky from Payability. Thanks so much, guys. I'm sure we'll do this again soon.
Thanks.
Soon. Bye-bye.
All right, bye.
Bye.